Welcome back again for the third video on structuring human resource management. Earlier, we had examined the functions and how HR plays a very strategic role in all its functions. So, in that process, we had examined the manpower planning, recruitment, selection process, training and development, compensation procedures, etc. All these, how they can be structured in a very strategic manner so that the best of the talent is or gets recruited and gets attracted into the organization, and the management can do the best and optimize the resources in the process. So the learning outcomes remain the same. And so now we will be speaking about the performance management, employee relations, and contemporary HR issues which the HR manager has to tackle in this video. Going forward, let's start with performance management. So having given employment to an employee in the organization, definitely the management would be interested to know what are the performance levels of the employee. Some standards or some targets will be set by the management in terms of performance standards. We may call it as performance standards or targets. Then the employee also performs in an actual manner, which we will call it as an actual performance. Then when we start comparing between what the actual performance of the employee is and what the desired or the standard set by the organization, sometimes there can be a gap between the two. So what we are saying is, by setting a standard, we want the employee to move into the desirable, achievable standard of performance. So this performance management will speak about, how do we motivate and how do we orchestrate an employee so that the desirable performance happens in the organization. Should we reward the employee more? What are the conditions in which he will perform? Who are the people with whom he will be interested to perform? Or what are the times? It could be in terms of timings, or what are the times when the performance levels are at their peaks in the individuals. These are some of the things that need to be addressed by the HR so that the optimization of human resources and its performance happens to achieve its objectives. So the very definition of performance management itself is a systematic process for improving the organizational performance by developing the performance of it. So if we develop or enhance the performance of the employees, automatically the organizational performance also will increase. And this can be done by creating set standards, planned goals, standards, competency requirements, and also in an effective management way. Then how does the HR go about it? The HR aims at empowering, motivating, rewarding employees to do their best. So it tries to give them some incentives, rewards them cash in kind, so that the best of their performances, the best of their best comes out. It also tries to see that there is some sort of synchronization between the individual's goals and the goals of the organization. And then a proactive role, in the sense that it tries to anticipate, it tries to put the individual's activities in the gear beforehand, or in the loop beforehand, so that automatically, while the individual or the employee performs in a set direction, it leads to the objectives of the organization, so that there is no sidetracking or going off track, etc. doesn't happen in the process. So if we see this performance management cycle, if we see this, of course, in the chapter on performance management and potential appraisal, we will be talking a lot more about this. But at this point, I will say that we speak about performance development agreement. That is the first one. That is where the standards are being set, the objectives are being shared, and people know what they have to do. Then, then the performance review takes place, then the performance throughout the year. So, it is not just that, that suddenly at the end of the year, the performance management or the appraisal process or something takes place at the end of a particular annual year. This is a continuous process where, since at the beginning itself, the objectives or the standards are being told or known, being made known to the employee, immediately or very intermittently, a review process also takes place, and then the management process in the form of either reward management or other disciplinary actions takes place, so that the performance is always on the track. This is how it goes about. Planning, that is where the performance and development agreement takes place between the employer and employee. Acting, or throughout, wherein they work together so that the objectives are being achieved. Then they review the assessing process and progress and achievements, so that action plans can be prepared, and in many steps performances are also being rated, that is quantified, whether they have reached the particular levels or not. Little more on the performance agreements, because the strategy involved in the performance management is this, wherein now how do you sort of come to sort of an agreement so that the employee will not go back on that and the desirable performance levels takes place. So the performance agreements, they define actually the expectations in the form of a role profile, and that will set out the requirements in the key result areas and competencies required for effective performances in the process. The role profile provides the basis wherein the objectives are being agreed upon, they are known to each other, and how they are going to be measured or quantified, and once they reach the end, the measurement or the assessment process levels are also known to each other. In the sequence of this, any performance improvement plans are also incorporated. That is, intermittently, if some small changes have to be made, so that might give a boost to the performance levels, then some sort of a flexibility or adaptability should be there where this can be included. Then also, the employee is also briefed as to the type of support systems that he will be receiving from the manager or the immediate boss, so that the work can take place in a very, very desirable manner. So the objectives, ongoing work objectives, targets, tasks, behaviors, these are the desirable behaviors, these are the projects we want you to complete, targets set in terms of numbers, then the objectives, it's the quantum of work, etc., etc., the roles and responsibilities that go ahead with it. All this can be quantified in terms of expected standard behaviors or targets from the employee's point of view. Then the criteria for objectives could be, it's a well-known thing, that is a SMART. That is, it should be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time frame. This is quite self-explanatory, so we don't have to get into it. Okay, so the objectives, when we start measuring them, they should be reaching out to all these aspects. How do we assess once the performance takes place? Okay, we can assess the performance in relation to the objective. That is one way. So you compare the actual and the desired or the standard. Then the level of knowledge and skills possessed and applied. So another way is the application in terms of the knowledge or the skill of the individual, the intensity with which it has gone about, or the depth of knowledge that gets shown in the process, etc. Behavior on the job. So the behavior could be in the form of interpersonal behaviors. It could also be in terms of time and motion. In study is time and motion aspect in terms of reduction in time and then cost, and errorless or error free, so to say, minimizing the errors, and no conflicts in terms of interpersonal relationships, or very less, few conflicts at that level. And the behavior in terms of where the upholding of the core values of the organization also takes place. So whatever way, the standard way the individual behaves, it should be such that it is actually upholding the value system of the organization, and overall it leads to some sort of an effective way with which the employee functions as well as the organization. How does the organization support the employee? Again, this is where the strategy part comes about. Let's take, for example, we measure performance biannually, or sometimes it could be annually also. Let's say after 6 months we would be looking at it. We'll be doing some interim assessment. That does not mean that for example, for the 6 whole months there is no communication between the manager and the team, so to say. Continuously, the manager will be monitoring the process and gives active support or encouragement so that any necessity or anything that is required for completing the performance up to the standard are all provided by the management. This is where we say the active involvement of the top management in the process. When this happens, okay, there is a culture which is being present in the organization. That is, in terms of high performance, culture gets built, and that is being maintained in the organization. So one of the characteristics of HPWS, that is the high performing work systems, is wherein high performance levels are also desired and attained. Next is where performance management is what the managers are expected to do, and that their performance measured by reference to the extent to which they do it conscientiously and well. It is not just reaching the standards, but it is also, at the end of the day, the particular employees and managers also derive a sense of satisfaction that they have done a good job and a great job in the process. That is when we say that it has been achieved, so to say. The review process, as I told you, okay, it's concrete. It allows both the parties to take a positive look, and in case there is a lack, in case there is a gap of meeting the performance standards, then this sort of meeting wherein we counsel the employees as to how that particular gap can be bridged and the objectives can be attained, they are all resolved in this review performance aspects, which takes place either biannually or annually. Usually about an employee. Okay, usually about an employee, it is the immediate manager who tries to give an assessment of his team or about his group, so to say. But from a few decades back, this concept of 360 degrees feedback was introduced, and from then onwards this model has been in practice. So if we have to gain more insights into an employee's work behaviors in the organization, then definitely we would go for a 360 degrees feedback. Now if you see the table, it has got the individual in the center, then the manager on the top, then the peers on the left side, peer group on the left side, then the people who report to the employee down, and to the right hand side we have the external or the internal customers or client so to say, so the stakeholders. So we get an information about the work behavior of the employee from different sources, and this is where we call it as a 360-degree feedback. And henceforth we make or we pass a judgment about the individual's performance in the organization. Basing on that, the next corrective measures or next steps are usually being taken up in the organization. And performance management without hurting the employees' sentiments, without hurting anybody's ego, counseling the employee so that the desired performance takes place is what is required by the HR department. And that task is taken up successfully by the HR by doing some hand-holding and by having some counselors in the process. Next function which needs to be addressed is that of employee relations. As stated earlier, we have moved from a stage of traditional HR functions to the modern everyday employer-employee relations, etc. So today we don't use the word workers. We don't much talk about unions, groups, etc. We simply say, employer, employee. We don't even say boss, subordinate, etc. We will simply title them as workforce. Workforce means all employees in the organization. Employer, employee, that's all. Whether it's a boss at whatever be the level, employer, boss, supervisor, and the others in the form of employees. Now what's happening of late, because of all this changed business environment, because of this changed business scenarios, the entire employer-employee relationships itself has undergone a paradigm shift. And with the rise in the IT sector, all the more this has become a matter of importance, so that the HR has to start focusing its attention on this. So if you look at this, the employee relationships consists of directly with employees, that is between management and employees, then through collective agreements with groups like trade unions, etc. Then we also have the employment policies and practices of the organization, which have a legal aspect into it. So the formal and the informal part of it comes about. Then we also have something called as an employee voice and communications. Like people sometimes are not happy with what is existing with certain practices. They would like to express their dissatisfaction, or they would like to ventilate their feelings, etc. So there is a communication process. There is a stepwise process through which all these aspects like grievances can be communicated, can be processed, and there is a grievance redressal mechanism which is laid down in every organization. Then we have, particularly where the unions are present in the shop floors, etc., where we have a formal system of rules, procedures. We have the Trade Union Act, we have the Factories Act, etc., which speaks about the collective bargaining, how to handle disputes in the labor relationships, and how to regulate the employment, etc. So what we actually need is a continuous engagement between managers and employee representatives and individuals in the organization. So in the process, disciplinary procedures are there, policies are there, procedures are there. At the same time, there are employees who are dissatisfied, or who actually were not the beneficiaries, or who could not get what they want to get, etc. So these things have to be addressed upon. So this is where the role of employee relations, where the HR's role as managing the employee relations comes about. So how does it go about? The HRM approach. Okay, so earlier, as I told you, we had the industrial relations. Now it is HRM. So this psychological contract which exists between the employer and employee. In earlier days, people used to just say comply with rules, follow the rules, whatever is the custom, whatever are the norms, whatever my predecessor does, whatever is a practice in the organization, we will follow it up. Here today we speak more with reference to commitment to organization, or upholding the values of the organization, and then working towards the mission statement of the organization itself. When it comes to the relationships, because we had low trust, collective bargaining, pluralistic, etc. Today, there is high trust between employer and employees, even though it is individualistic as far as relationship is concerned. The emphasis is more on the individual, but still the amount of trust is more, we can say. Then the design of the organization also, it was more structured earlier with a strict hierarchy, division of labor, control systems, etc. Today we have flexible roles, flat structures, teamwork, autonomy, etc. is what actually comprises. So the HRM has to work in this dynamic, changed work environment by catering to these three dimensions of psychological contract, relationships, and organization design. So manage the employees, fitting them into where they are and trying to see where actually where is the origin of the issue or the problem is. In this process, it has to achieve satisfactory employment relationships. That's what I said, psychological contracts. Then build stable and cooperative relationships between employees and stakeholders, organization, minimizing conflict, etc. And then involvement of the employees in the communication processes, that they also understand what is actually going on and develop some sort of a mutuality, that is in terms of understanding and clarifying the relationship processes with unions and building a harmonious relationships. So this, if it is in place beforehand, it acts in a very strategic manner, and HR is taking a proactive role by putting these things beforehand, so to say. Then the actual relationship, employer-employee relationships processes, actually, the trade unions, the collective bargaining, we have more to talk about it when we do the chapter on IR in detail. This is just to get an idea for you as to what is actually required for you. So in terms of trade unions, the employer-employee procedures, participation, involvement, then the relationship, working arrangements, these are all the things which the HR puts in a very succinct manner, so that the employees do not have any ambiguity, and they're able to understand, comprehend, and act so that the conflicts get minimized in the process. So the active participation of the employees is very much required, and then harmonization of teams in the process is also very much required in the organization. We come next to almost the last point in this particular unit, and that is, what are all those issues with which HRM is concerned in the recent way, and what are those aspects on which it has to concentrate upon, so to say. These are some of the trends which we notice in our organizations, where the HR needs to focus on the workers' well-being. So even in a previous survey, almost around 40% of the employees revealed that they would be happy if their employers focused on or gave importance to their well-being, so to say. Then prepare for humans plus bots, that as a new blended workforce. Then soft skills. So much of importance of late is being given to soft skills that it's like a power skills in 2020. We all know that analytics, particularly HR analytics, people analytics, are going to be used a lot as far as decision making is concerned. So some amount of knowledge, gaining knowledge and use of these analytical methods is also very much required. Then improving the experience of the employees in the form of providing more opportunities for learning, continuous learning, etc. Then focusing on employer branding. See, building reputation, image building of the organization is also very, very important. Then audit of workplace in terms of environment, physical, emotional, environmental attributes is very much necessary. This usually speaks about the morale, commitment levels of the employees, and the higher the morale, higher the commitment levels, lower the employee turnover and absenteeism, so to say. And keeping in line with the digital technology, exploring virtual reality for corporate training in today's world, so to say. Then blended learning mode as far as learning, development, and then coaching are concerned. Then recruiting for skills rather than for degrees will be the call of the day. Workplace experience. People want a conducive climate to work. They want a better environment, which includes people in intellectual satisfaction. These are the things which today's youth are also demanding. Then upskilling in terms of investment in team and business growth. So definitely skill upgradation, technology upgradation is absolutely essential. And then providing holistic health benefits and establishing work-life balance, flexible workspaces, and taking care of these millennials and Generation Z people, etc. is very, very important. So these will be some of the things, some of the priorities which the HR can concentrate in today's business environment. And these trends actually correlate with the type of challenges which we try to speak in Unit 1. So there is a correlation between this and the trends, future trends, which the HR has to focus upon. So building up on this definitely will be building up in a high performing work system can be set. Thank you.